Very nice to be here today. Thank you for inviting me again. And it's always very wonderful to speak to such a distinguished crowd. Um, so I chose this topic, is science value free? Because in today's society, um, in today's society, this is something that is very relevant. Partly because we see a world that is torn with war. I'll just share my screen here. Where did this go? Sorry, 1 second. Here. Um, and in this world, we see two great forces. We see the forces of science and we see the forces of religion. And science and religion influence or affect our world in a way that nothing else affects us. Science and religion are like two tracks of a train on which the train moves forward. And if either one is misguided, then it can lead to great disturbance, great destruction in this world. Right now, we see a great conflict going on in Ukraine and Russia. And so much of it is due to the advancement of science, the weapons that we've created. These are the advancement of science. We see the world is becoming a hotter place, very hot. This is due to global warming. And this is very much connected with the advancement of science. We see forests being destroyed. Now, if you see a tree, it's a great opulence. In big cities, you don't see trees anymore. This is also due to the advancement of science. So it used to be that people thought that science was value-free, that science was not connected with any form of virtue. If you're doing science, you're working for the advancement of science. Science by itself is neutral. And the scientist has no obligation or has no need to look at key ideas of virtue in order to do the right thing. They just have to do their science. But now, as the world progresses, as science progresses, as time moves forward, we see that such is perhaps not the case. And so in this presentation, I'll start off by first looking at what virtue ethics is. As was mentioned, I teach ethics at Aurora University. So one of the forms of ethics is called virtue ethics. It's the most common form of ethics. Historically speaking, it was the most popular form of ethics. So let's take a moment first and just look at virtue ethics. What is virtue ethics? First, if we can define or understand virtue ethics, then we can see what's the relationship of science with virtue ethics. So virtue ethics goes back to the time of Socrates in the Western world. It goes back to the time of Socrates. So it's very interesting. So I thought I would bring in some Socrates here. Because there's actually a lot of, you could say, resonance between Socrates and Plato and the Bhagavad Gita. And both of them are very relevant to the scientific advancement. Socrates states that some things are more important than life itself, such as being true to one's principles, no matter how others may feel about it, holds the key to what Socrates seems to have considered the good life or life worth living. So Socrates, he has this whole discussion on the good life. What is the good life? And Socrates, he talks about how there are certain principles that are that one holds true to oneself, no matter what others feel about it, no matter what happens. These are principles of life that are the principles of virtue, like honesty, truthfulness, compassion, trustworthiness, tolerance, forgiveness. These are all virtues that Socrates says are important than life itself. In the case of some, freedom. People fight for freedom. We see now nations fighting for their freedom. Freedom they see to be more important than their own life. They will risk their life and go in battle to fight for freedom. That's another example of a virtue that one holds to be more important than life itself. For Socrates, and indeed also for Plato, seeking the truth and examining one's life in the process should lead to an understanding and knowledge of essential reality beyond the world of change and appearance. So the ultimate virtue is to seek out truth, Socrates says. And one has to seek out truth by examining life. What is the nature of life? What is the purpose of life? For what are we living? What is life worth living for? Socrates very famously said that an unexamined life is not worth living. So life that is unexamined, if you don't examine your life, it's not a life that is worth living. So this was the highest virtue. Socrates' idea is a search for the truth. Virtue for Socrates meant to question the meaning of life and to keep one's integrity while searching, to not be swayed by one's physical longings or fear of unpleasant situations or concern for comfort. So this is very much in tune with Socrates' own life, which I will describe. But he said that the ultimate virtue is to question the meaning of life. And while going on the search to keep one's integrity, to not be swayed by physical longings. For Socrates, the good life was not one in which there's a lot of physical pleasure or sensual pleasure, but one that is but one that is seeking for the truth. There's no fear of unpleasant situations or concern for comfort. The good life, therefore, is not a pleasant life in which people seek gratification for the sake of having a good time. The good life is strenuous, but gratifying in its own way, because one knows that one seeks and sees the truth, and one is in control of oneself. So in today's modern society, in materialistic society, the good life is one in which one seeks gratification of the senses. A good life is measured by the number of houses a person has, by the number of cars that a person has. A good life is measured by the amount of technological advancement that we make, or scientific advancement. The good life is one of sense enjoyment. Right now they make a machine for everything. They make a machine to wash your clothes. Right? There's washing machines, dryer machines. Okay, that's something very good. But now, they make machines to vacuum the floor, self vacuuming. The machine will go in the house and vacuum everywhere. There's machines to massage your feet, machines to massage your head. So we measure our advancement by these things. But Socrates says the good life is not a pleasant life in which people seek gratification for the sake of having a good time. That is, according to Socrates, actually not the best life. Just because it is an easy life, a pleasant life, doesn't mean that it is the good life. The good life is one of meaning, in which one knows the truth and seeks the truth. So Socrates himself is very interesting. He was actually a soldier. He was not a philosopher to begin with. It's amazing that many of the great thinkers, philosophers, were in very difficult situations in their life. Why? Arjuna was also a soldier. Because it's in the course of difficulty, in the course of adversity, that we search for the meaning of life. Arjun is an example. Socrates is an example. Confucius is an example. Confucius had a very difficult life. First, his father died, then his mother died. He was left alone in this world. He was in China, and in that time, there was the warring states. The rulers were using the general public as pawns for their own purposes to fight in the battle. That led him to a great search about how to bring social harmony in this world. Buddha also witnessed death, disease, old age, and that led to his enlightenment. So Socrates also, the whole of Western philosophy starts with Socrates and Plato. There's one famous Western philosopher, Wittgenstein, and he says that after Plato, all of Western philosophy is simply footnotes to Plato. So these two individuals, and Plato's guru was Socrates. So all of Western philosophy comes from Socrates, who was a soldier in the Athenian infantry, and he had distinguished himself as a courageous man. The loyalty to Athens that was expected of him then was something he lived up to his entire life. He was very loyal to his country. He was known as a very courageous soldier, and he lived through the battles. Socrates never ventured outside Athens, not even to go to the Olympic Games. It's said that he stayed his whole life in Athens. And there he was, then after being a soldier, he became a very great philosopher. So Socrates is very famous for his philosophy, which is very spiritual in nature and very foundational, very logical. And Socrates is particularly famous for his death. The death of Socrates became his defining moment that showed the man that he was. Many cultures take the position that someone's life cannot be judged until it is over, that the ending helps define how people think of the life spent. So this was also an idea in Greece, a very much also a Vedic idea. Our guru, Srila Prabhupada, he often said that death is a final test. And if we've led a good life, then we will pass the final test. So if we want to know if we've led a good life, we can see how we pass the final test. Just like the final words of Gandhi were, "Hey Ram." So the fact that he said the name of Ram at the last moment of his life meant that he led a good life. Because at the end of his life, he was chanting the names of God. In the same way, Socrates also and others, philosophers around the world have said that one's life can be seen by how they spend their final moments. What are their thoughts? If we've led a good life, our thoughts will be very good. If we've led a bad life, our thoughts will be more materialistic. In the case of Socrates, it seems fitting that his life is judged in the light of his death. So, in fact, Socrates showed that he led a good life in light of his death. In the face of adversity, in the ultimate situation beyond his control, he seemed to have remained in full control of himself. This is another reason that Socrates has become not just the philosopher's ideal, but also a human role model, because he faced injustice with courage and rationality. So Socrates' own philosophy that we saw, that more important than life are certain virtues. Socrates himself showed that by his own action, by his own example, that he wasn't just saying it, but he showed that he himself practiced it. He showed that at the end of his life. So what happened at the end of his life? Here we see this image, a very famous image. In the center, you see Socrates here. And next to him, around him, are all of his loving disciples. So many people loved him by that time. And Socrates was condemned to death by the Athenians themselves. And what was he condemned for? He is condemned for misleading the youth, for poisoning the youth at that time with his philosophy. So this is, Prabhupada says, this is the great curse of preachers, of people who are out to do good, who are trying to do benefit for society. When they speak up against the materialistic norm, then people become very angry with them. They think, they see them as enemies. So Socrates was speaking about the soul, was speaking about spirituality, was speaking philosophy. And the leaders at that time didn't like the fact that he was influencing so many young minds. So he was charged for poisoning the minds of the youth. And the punishment was that he was to drink poison. The punishment was that he would have to be, he got capital punishment, and that was by drinking poison. So this news came out that Socrates would be sentenced to death. And at that time, Socrates was free. He found out because he had many well-wishers and he was a soldier himself, probably very respected in the government. So he found out through means that this is about to happen. And when this news comes, his disciples immediately tell Socrates that leave Athens. You can leave, right? Leave Athens and go somewhere else. Flee the country, and in this way save your life. And Socrates says, no, I will not leave. Because why? Why should I leave? Why should I leave like a coward? His famous words are, catch me if you can. Socrates says that they cannot kill me because I am the eternal soul. I am not this body, I am the eternal soul. So though he was convicted of impiety by the Athenian courts, Socrates, rather than renouncing his beliefs, he died willingly, discoursing on the immortality of the soul before drinking poisonous hemlock. So at that point, he gave his final instructions to his disciples, where he says, why are you crying? He was going to get the poison. He was going to die. But his disciples were crying around him. And he tells his disciples, why are you crying? Because you are crying. I've taught you so much. I've given you so much learning. But you are crying because you are thinking that you are this body. But actually, you're not this body. Actually, I am not this body. So he began to speak about the soul. And his knowledge of the soul became his reason to stand steadfast to his virtues. Due to the knowledge of the soul, he was not afraid of death. Due to the knowledge of the soul, he was not afraid of anything. And due to the knowledge of the soul, he did not give up his virtues. So in this image, we see one of his disciples is passing him the poison. He asks one of his disciples to give it. And he's in a very jolly mood, as you see. And his disciples looking the other way, unable to give this poisonous hemlock. And here you see Plato sitting here. Plato was his disciple who greatly loved him. And it was so painful for him, he could not see it. So you see him here looking the other way. And these were the other disciples, wailing and crying. But Socrates is drinking that poison. So this is very meaningful that the greatest name in Western philosophy was someone who spoke about the soul, about virtue, and how virtue was more important than life. How that virtue can be realized when we know the meaning of life and the nature of life. That is, when we know that we are an eternal soul, we are not this temporary body. And I actually found this, Srila Prabhupada actually said that Socrates was Brahman realized. So Prabhupada actually in one place, this is not ordinary. An ordinary man cannot do this. But Socrates could do this because he is Brahman realized. And Prabhupada said this. And I couldn't help but think that how similar this is to the situation of the Bhagavad Gita. In the Gita, there's a great army on both sides of this battle. Huge, massive army. And Arjun is in the middle of these two armies, and he is lamenting that how can I fight this battle? All these people will die. How can I carry out my duty of fighting? Because he has great deep attachment to his friends, to his kinsmen, to his body, to his own self, his own body. And though he wants to follow the path of virtue, of course, Arjun himself is a very virtuous person. He's not eager to fight, and that by itself is a great virtue. He has great compassion. He's not greedy for the kingdom. He's thinking better to save the lives of so many people than so many people die to make us Pandavas the king. So this is great virtue. But even a higher virtue is performing his duty, not fighting for himself, but fighting for dharma. And he's unable to do his duty. But then Krishna convinces him to. And how does he convince him? In the very next words, in the first response that Krishna gives to Arjuna, Krishna speaks about the nature of the soul, the nature of the Atma, the soul, and tells Arjuna that because you are a soul, therefore you should not be afraid to do the right thing. Because you are an eternal soul, you're not this body. You should not fall victim to the attachments of the body. You should follow the path of bhakti and of dharma. So Krishna then speaks the knowledge of the soul, and in this way, Arjun gets the strength to fight, and he fights in the battle. Very similar to how when Socrates speaks the knowledge of the soul, and in this way gives great strength to his disciples, and is able to do his duty even at the cost of risking his life. So in Western philosophy, and also in Eastern philosophy, this is what virtue ethics is. Virtue ethics speaks about virtues that a person should possess. As opposed to other forms of ethics, virtue ethics does not focus on the action that a person performs, but virtue ethics focuses on the person themselves. What is the person? What is the quality or the nature of a person? And they know that if a person is virtuous, then whatever acts they'll do will also be virtuous, right? We know this. If the heart is in the right place, then whatever we do is good. Whatever that person does is good. And if the heart is in the wrong place, then they try to be good, but even in that goodness, they always, they're doing bad. We can think of so many people like this in this world. So some forms of ethics like utilitarianism, deontological ethics, these focus on actions. But virtue ethics focuses on virtues. How deep is the person? What is our character? What is the meaning of life? How much are we seeking the truth? Or how much are we simply interested in gratifying our senses? Therefore, virtue ethics is considered by many to be the deepest form of ethics. And most philosophers actually ascribe or accept virtue ethics as the best or ultimate form of ethics. So now, with this knowledge of what virtue ethics is in the East and West, we come to this question: is science value-free? Is science value-free? So, as I mentioned in the beginning, many scientists, many philosophers in the past used to think, to this day think, that science itself is value-free. Science is simply a matter of advancement. It simply has to do with the progress of knowledge. And science itself is value-free, but only the application of science is what has values associated with it. A famous sentence is that science asks the how questions. How do things work? And religion or philosophy and ethics, they ask the why questions. Why are things the way that they are? But in 1968 in Germany, Jürgen Habermas challenged the traditional scientific view that science is value-free or morally neutral. He challenged this view. Why? Habermas claimed that science might attempt to be objective, but then an element of vested interest is always present. So, very key point here. He points out that science always has some vested interest. The progress of science is always motivated by some interest. There's some funding that is bringing about that scientific research. There's some interest of the scientist himself in doing it. So there's always a person behind the exploration, behind the discovery. Habermas's point is that one may think science is conducted in a value-neutral way, but it is not. Excuse me. There's nothing like value-neutral science. You may find it very interesting to know that all the world's scientific research, that in all the world's scientific research, 60% of all the world's scientific research is done for one particular purpose. Or as you could say, for one application, for one purpose. Who can guess? What is that purpose? Someone from the audience. Of all scientific research, 60% of all that research is funded for one reason, it is done for one reason, it is for one purpose. What is that? Who would like to say?
There is message in the chat window.
Okay. Sorry. Yes. For money. Okay. Very nice. Is done for money. Yes, that is true. But yes, war. Very good. So 60% of all research, imagine millions of scientists, is done for the purpose of military advancement. Imagine the progress of science, the progress of knowledge is meant to find better ways to kill other people. And Srila Prabhupada actually said this in many places. He said, your advancement of science, by this scientific advancement, you're making better bombs, better ways to destroy people. What is the use of such advancement? Scientific advancement is very good. Prabhupada said this. We have nothing against science or its advancement. But what is the purpose for which you are doing it? What scientific advancement are you making? We're not finding better ways to avoid war, to improve life, but better ways to destroy this world. I was just before this seminar, I was talking to my father, and he mentioned that both right now, Russia and the USA are working on a weapon. It's a very public thing, well known, very clear agenda. They're working on a weapon that when it's released, then that bomb will not destroy the buildings. It won't destroy the infrastructure where it falls, but it will kill the people in that building. You might think, how is this possible? Well, already these bombs are there. They're called vacuum bombs. And these vacuum bombs, when they're thrown inside a building, they suck all the oxygen outside in the building. And so everyone will, they suck it out and they release some toxin or something like that. And everyone in the building dies. And the building stands as it is. So this is the advancement that, a person would think, no, better make something that destroys the building, but lets the people live, the civilians, the innocent civilians. Destroy the building, destroy the weapons, destroy the... No, they're building a weapon that kills the people inside, but doesn't destroy the building, so the buildings stay. Because when there's war, then the politicians may feel very bad that now their whole city is destroyed. They have to rebuild it. So this is all, politics, wars, just play things in the hands of the politicians. So let the people die, but let the building stay. This is scientific advancement. So science is never conducted in a value neutral way. 60% of all the research, before going into philosophy and religion, I did my bachelor's and master's in electrical engineering. And in my master's, I did a master's project on pattern recognition, artificial intelligence and pattern recognition. And later on, I found out that the research that I was working on, the place where I got the funding from, it was actually from the Department of Defense. And the research that I did was funded by the Department of Defense in the United States. So this is, even things that we are working on, we don't know. The funding may actually be coming from ultimately the Department of Defense, where they're needing something to recognize patterns, recognize characters, and that's why they're doing this. So this is a very common. This is my firsthand experience that this is the case. So the idea that science is value-free is a false idea, because if it's not guided by knowledge, that same science will destroy us, right? We're seeing this in this world. The greatest scientist in the world, at least one of the greatest ones, Albert Einstein, he noted this point in a very stark way in his life. During his life, he was the greatest minds in science. He made so much scientific advancement. He was the one person who contradicted Newton's theories and showed that, in fact, the world is relative. It's not like the clock, like classical physics that Newton thought. And Albert Einstein felt that science by itself is not enough. He said the scientific method can teach us nothing else beyond how facts are related to and conditioned by each other. Knowledge of what is does not open the door directly to knowledge of what should be. So this is a quote by him. He's saying, knowledge of what is does not open the door directly to knowledge of what should be. This is the way things are. You're making that, but how should life be? That is a question that we cannot ignore. Simply, we're doing the scientific method. And this realization came to Einstein in a very stark way during his life, at a very opportune moment. Initially, Einstein didn't think this way, but after a certain experience in his life, he realized the limitations of science and the need to have good values along with our scientific advancement. What is that? Who knows? What is that incident in his life that brought this awakening in Einstein? Someone can put it in the chat box. What was the incident in Einstein's life that made him realize, yes, Varunji, you're very knowledgeable in this area. So, yes, it was the atom bomb. Einstein said, I made one great mistake in my life when I signed the letter to President Roosevelt recommending that atom bombs be made. Einstein was the discoverer of the great atomic bomb. In one sense, what type of a great scientist was he? So he was very innocently making this atom bomb. He said, I'm just advancing science, and I'm making this atom that will, I can break it in half, and let's see the explosion that it makes. And President Roosevelt, the president of the country, asked Albert Einstein's opinion once he had published the research, made it available to the US government. Then he asked Einstein, should we make these atom bombs? And if you advise, then we will make them. And Einstein signed the letter and he said, yes, I recommend they be made. And then he saw the result, Hiroshima, right? 2 atomic bombs were released on Japan. Over 1 million people died. Imagine how destructive these weapons are. Over 1 million people died in these atomic bombs from the radiation, from the effects of it. Just in a moment's time, how dangerous the world has become. And then Einstein realized that no, this scientific advancement was a great mistake. What is the purpose of science if it destroys life? If it does not cultivate the human spirit? Is science today improving our life? Is it making us wiser? Or is it destroying the human spirit? Is it making people more loving and compassionate or less loving and compassionate? Is it making people more social or less social? If it's not acting for our benefit, then we have to think that, are we exploring the right science? Because many of you have put this in the chat box also, and this is a fact that there's many forms of sciences. And some forms of science are uplifting, whereas others are degrading. Just like the Vedic science of mantra is also a science. It's a science that shows the power of sound. Through mantra, one can do very wonderful things. And people in the past were advancing in life. It's said in the Vedas and other places that they were very advanced, but not by the science of machinery, of iron and metal, but by the science of mantra, which is non-polluting. It doesn't give off any gas. It's the science of mantra. And this science people have forgotten, the science of mantra. There's actually an incident in the Mahabharata where Arjuna and Krishna, this is before the battle of Kurukshetra, they're off, traveling on the chariot, going somewhere, and they come across a great forest. And this forest is inhabited by demons. It's completely infested with demons, the greatest of which is Maya Danav. So Krishna tells Arjuna that you burn this forest so that all the demons inside of it die, because they were all demoniac, very demoniac people. So Arjuna burns it, the demons die. The ones that try to escape, Arjuna, because it's now burning, they have to come out. Arjuna can find them. He kills them with his arrows. And then the leader of all the demons who was inhabiting that forest was Maya Danav. He was very intelligent. He knew that he could not fight Arjuna and win him. So he immediately goes and surrenders himself to Arjuna. He knew that the way out is not to fight with Arjuna, but to surrender, because he's more powerful. So better we surrender and save our life. So he surrenders. And when he surrenders, Arjuna, being a great warrior, he has to protect him. He says, well, you've surrendered to me, so I must protect you now. And so he gives him shelter, he gives him protection. And Mayadana becomes so happy by Arjuna's generosity, by accepting him. Mayadana is so happy that he says, Arjuna, I want to give you a gift. I want to give you some benediction, because he's a great Mayavi. So he asks Arjuna, you ask me for anything. And Arjuna is the friend of Krishna. What does he need? He tells Mayadana, I don't need anything. I don't need anything from you. But Mayadana said, no, I insist. I want to give you something. And so therefore he says, I will give you the science of machines. This is there in the Mahabharata, that I will give you this, knowledge of the machines, of metal and machines. And to this, Arjun thinks, oh, this is very nice. He's giving me some knowledge of this. But at that time, Krishna intervenes and he tells Arjun, he says, don't accept this science. Don't accept this knowledge, because this is the one science that has the power or the possibility or capability of destroying the world. This is a lower form of science. And so don't take this form of science because it has the capability of destroying the world. And to some degree, we see this. If you look at the history of the world, in the last 60 years, we have destroyed the world more than we destroyed it in the last 4 billion years. According to scientists, this world is about 4 billion years old. Vedic time also describes that the most recent creation was 4 billion years ago of this particular yuga, Satyug. And so we have destroyed the world more in the last 60 years. This is verifiable fact in terms of water systems, air quality, than we have in the last 4 billion years. And we, as human beings, we should reflect on this, that what world are we leaving for our children? This is all science. But is this science being properly applied? So it used to be, again, that people thought science is neutral. But now with global warming, the rise of global warming, people are realizing we have to see, what are we creating? Is it going to protect the world or not? Day by day, India is getting hotter. Every place in the world is getting harder. Military technology, we talked about this. So much pollution, so much pain is inflicted by the rise of military technology. Genetic engineering, we will talk about this a little more. We have to take responsibility for genetic engineering. Can be a very dangerous science. And nuclear physics, of course, the nuclear bomb, we just talked about this. Nuclear physics also we have to look into. So in so many ways, science is having a direct effect on our lives. And if properly utilized for the upliftment of human life, as Socrates said, to find the meaning of life, science can be our greatest friend. It can be our greatest ally. But if it is misapplied, then that's another thing. I'm going to skip a few things here and go here to this genetic engineering and stem cell research and cloning. These days, they are putting pig hearts into human beings. They actually did a surgery. They actually did a surgery where they put the heart of a pig into a human being. And that, of course, that man after some time died. It was not a successful surgery. But is this good advancement of science? To put the bodies of animals in human beings. Similarly, we have now different forms of genetic engineering, just like GM foods. I'm not sure how much all of you know about this, but GM foods is very common. This is a genetically modified seed. And it's a big corporation, big industry. And now this industry is also coming to India. And what this GM seed is that this GM seed, genetically modified seed, when planted in the ground, it more easily grows. It grows more easily. You have to, the ground has to be less fertile, and the mosquitoes and bugs will not eat that plant. So it's much easier to control. You get more yield from it. The vegetables will come out bigger and nicer and more good looking. So farmers now across the world, especially in the United States and other countries, and now it's gone into India full scale, they are starting to use GM seeds because these seeds make farming much more easier, especially in terms of mosquitoes and things. But why would companies be selling this? What would be their benefit if they're making seeds like this? The genetically modified seed is such that its seed is made such that when the plant grows from that seed, the seeds of that plant will not produce other plants. Meaning the seeds produced from that one plant are infertile. So what does this do? Before, farmers would take the seeds of the plant that they've grown, and they would take that seed and they would throw it in the ground and produce more plants. And then from time to time, they would go somewhere and get fresh seed, new seed. But this is the life cycle of nature. But now with this GM seed, all the farmers in the world are now dependent on one company, GM Foods, that is producing these seeds. Monsanto, the name of that company is Monsanto. Because those seeds will only produce once. So once the farmer is done that year, next year, he has to go back and buy seeds from Monsanto to produce it. Now, what this can do is it can make, not only is it, okay, this company is making money off of it, but it can make the whole world dependent on one or two companies, such that all the food supply is in the hands of a few people. And due to politics or war or something like this, one may not have seeds because they only have the seeds that reproduce. And a further quality of these plants is that the pollen of these plants, when it spreads around, that pollen, if it goes to plants that do reproduce, it will make them infertile. So many times, the forests or the farms around the farms where the genetic seeds are being produced, they become infertile due to this GM seed. So this is scientific advancement. But is it moral? Is it moral to make a seed like this that does not reproduce? Is it moral to genetically modify animals and plants in such a way that they're better for human consumption? Now in America, they're putting the genes of pigs into tomatoes. Why would they put the genes of pigs into tomatoes? They're doing it, why? Because then the tomato has a very thick skin. It's like a meat. And you could take the tomato and you could throw it on the ground, it won't break. But it's completely tasteless. But it looks very good. And they're doing this because food is not grown locally now. It's grown, in Peru, somewhere else. So it needs to be in the truck for 2 weeks before it comes to the destination. So by doing this genetic modification, the food also will not spoil so easily. So they're putting animal genes into human beings, and they're putting animal genes into plants. Just see, this is called Kali. This is called demoniac science. There's also good science, but there's also demoniac science, and that's why it's not free of anything. And finally, animal ethics is also a very big area, something that we all need to wake up to. We may think, I'm in India, there's no need for animal ethics. India is now the greatest exporter of leather, and many say even beef in the world. The land of cows, the land of Krishna, the land of love for animals is now turning into a slaughterhouse. And these points that I've made, these are not my points actually. These is from from very contemporary discussions in the West, where people in America are waking up to animal ethics. They're speaking out against it, against animal mistreatment. Our treatment of animals affects the welfare of animals very substantially. So animals also get affected by the way that we treat them. And so much of animal mistreatment is due to experimentation and testing, and putting antibiotics in animals. One way is through experimentation and the testing of products on animals. Critics such as Peter Singer contend that most experiments and tests are unjustified on moral grounds because animals have moral rights. Animals have moral rights. He stresses the moral necessity of taking into account animal pain and suffering. So it's very interesting. I went to a conference at Oxford, and I'm going to end very soon in 2 minutes, just to last slide, one more slide after this, then I'm done. I went to a conference in Oxford where they were talking about animal ethics. And in that, they brought the science in. You know, what is the science? What does science say in terms of what animals feel when you hurt them or you kill them? And they've done so many experiments, and they found out that animals feel the same pain. The same neurons go on in their brain, the same chemicals are brought up. They feel the same pain that humans feel when they are killed. So a cow or a goat or a pig, when you slaughter it, it will experience the same amount of pain, the same intensity of pain that the human being feels. And this has been scientifically proven. Based upon, the human being will release these chemicals and as a result feel the pain in the same way the animal is doing the same thing, especially the mammals. They're just exactly the same. The birds also, the fish also, they feel pain. Anything that has flesh feels pain in this almost the same way as humans do. And the conclusion of that conference at Oxford, very interesting, was that killing animals, slaughtering animals, was no longer justified on scientific grounds. This is an example of when science can help us, right? It's not justified by scientific grounds because based on what science is showing us, there's no difference in the experience of pain. So if we feel that killing a human being is incorrect because of the pain it causes, we should also feel that killing an animal is incorrect because the animal is feeling the same pain. So many of the participants together, their conclusion of that conference was that on scientific grounds, we have no justification to kill and eat animals. This is a conference that happened almost 10 years ago. I'm sure now there's even more advancement, especially factory farming, these slaughterhouses. The largest and most devastating impact on animals is the production of animal-related products, in particular meat. Here it is well known, it is a scientific fact that the greatest polluter to the environment today, this is not me, this is all the environmentalists, they say, greatest polluter today is the gases that are released as a result of animal slaughter. And for no other reason than saving the environment to reduce global climate change. Today, there's industries that are mass producing, you could say, protein meats. It's actually become a big business because they're saying that we have to stop this animal slaughter, otherwise the whole environment will get destroyed. And this is the reaction. Our Vedas tell us, Prabhupada told us, that if we slaughter animals, we won't get away with it. If we're causing pain to others, it will destroy our planet. When there's animal slaughter, Prabhupada said there'll be more wars, more fighting within society, outside of society, within families. This is a result of animal slaughter. The economizing of the meat and animal product industries leads to their treating animals in ways that is cruel and immoral. Is it wrong to eat meat? The answer depends on whether animals have moral rights and to what extent these rights are comparable with human rights. And like I said, science today is telling us that they are comparable. Human beings and animals feel the same amount of pain. So how can we kill them and be morally justified? So all of this comes back to the question of who am I? If we understand that what is the meaning of life? What is the purpose of life? Am I meant to create things that will destroy the world? Am I meant to create things that will modify things that will cause the plants and trees to stop growing? Am I meant to do all of these things? Is this who I am? Then that will lead to our knowledge of how science should be applied, which forms of sciences should be accepted and which should not be. But I hope through this presentation, you've at least seen, you've actually understood that science is not value-free. We have to inculcate values in the scientific world. We have to teach character. We have to teach good values in our schools. And then the science that we will produce, the science that we will discover, will be for the welfare of society. That science will benefit, will nurture, and will make society flourish rather than destroy society. So I'll stop here. I've actually gone a little over my time. If there's any comments, questions, please.
Yeah. So thank you, Professor Gupta. So I request audience can directly ask the questions, and if they want, they can also put their questions in the chat window. We can read for you, or if you want to directly ask, you can ask. Okay, so there was one question by Sumit Halgover. Science also follows some ethics. So I feel in this way, science has value. Please comment.
Well, see, this is the heart of the issue, that science is not a person. So when we say science follows some ethics, no, the scientist follows some ethics, right? So if we want to bring ethical principles in science, then that is our choice. But we cannot say that any scientific advancement that any scientist does is value-free. It has no, because like you're saying, the scientist has the choice to be ethical or unethical. Right? The science is never value-free because there's always someone behind it. There's also science follows some ethics if there's a scientist behind it who you could say integrates science with ethics, but not by itself. That's why we have all of these adverse forms of science that I mentioned, forms of science that seem to be at least unethical.
Right. So any other question from audience? Mr. T.K. Mishra, you want to ask because you have put 2-3 comments. Are you there? Mr. T.K. Mishra? So anyone else? Mr. Ajay Verma has joined first time.
Hello, Dr. Gupta. It was nice listening to your talk, and I'm Rekha. And I just had this question. I work basically with research ethics principles. So when I work with this research ethics principles, I feel it's more of the principles are kind of derived from Christianity, and it's kind of more of Western thoughts of philosophy. And do you think like when you spoke about Rama and stuff, I was just curious to know, like, can you connect those kind of topics with the Hindu philosophy?
Yes. Actually, one of the slides I didn't cover due to interest of time, and I want to share this with you. So you find virtues in the Bhagavad Gita itself. And on multiple occasions, in 3 or 4 places, Krishna gives a list of virtues. So the Gita is full of virtues that need to be developed and practiced by the reader and by the practitioner of the Gita. This list is from chapter 10, text 4 and 5. Krishna says that virtues are intelligence, knowledge, freedom from doubt and delusion, forgiveness, truthfulness, control of the senses, control of the mind, happiness, fearlessness, non-violence, equanimity, satisfaction, austerity, and charity. So this is an example of various virtues that need to be cultivated. And our science and our scientific advancement needs to be compatible with these virtues. So, for example, if we are working on military advancement, as I gave the example of building bombs that kill people, but not the infrastructure around it, then does that resonate with the virtue of nonviolence, ahimsa? Does that make people fearless, or does it make them so fearful? If our scientific advancement is to increase more and more, now you can watch TV on a 100-inch screen or a 500-inch screen, then is that increasing the virtue of satisfaction and austerity? So there's no shortage of you could say ethical morals or codes. There's no shortage, right? Similarly, we have the we have the ethical principle of karma, that if science is misapplied, we will get a reaction for it. This is, I think, the most useful ethical principle that can be applied in so many different situations, and that every great thinker, religious teacher has thought, that do unto others as you would like do unto yourself. Do unto others as you'd like. This is the golden rule. And in Christianity and many other of the world's religions, this is a moral principle, an ethical principle, because this is the way we should live, right? Do unto others as you would like done unto yourself. But in Vedic principles, this is actually, in some ways, it's taken a step further, because do unto others as you would like do unto yourself, because it will actually happen to yourself, whatever you do to others, right? That's what karma is telling us, that whatever you do to others will come back to yourself, as you see in this image. What goes around comes around, an eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, or Newton's third law of motion, which is for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. So the golden rule is no longer a rule that is good in theory, but in fact that is the reality of the world. And that's why we should practice it. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Dr. Gupta.
So, Professor Gupta, this was a very nice talk. Is there any move internationally to regulate the ethics of science? As regards the medical science, there are supposed to be ethical committees constituted in every medical research activity, and there is a ethical committees for even the trials on the animals. But is there any move internationally to regulate the science, maybe any kind of science which is against the humanity? Is there any move by international bodies?
Yes, good question. Thank you for your question. In every field of science, there's always some regulating bodies. As you're saying, in the field of medicine, there's so many regulating bodies that look at, the ethical use of organs, organ transplants. You have them in the United States, you have some in India also. Similarly, in the field of military, right? There's actually entire United Nations councils that investigate war crimes. United Nations councils and so many treaties that regulate the use of nuclear weapons. But the question is, who follows them? Right? There's already treaties which regulate the use of vacuum bombs and cluster bombs, that they're illegal in warfare, because these bombs specifically target citizens rather than soldiers. They cause more harm to citizens than soldiers. But right now in the war, we see these bombs are being readily used. So who is following them? And this is why I started with Socrates and the Gita, because science will only become ethical, it will only be used in ethical ways if our heart changes, if people's hearts changes. Right? Gandhi said there's enough for every person's need, but not for one man's greed. So there's no shortage of anything in this world. We have no shortage of food, no shortage of defense, no shortage of water, no shortage of anything. The only shortage is the shortage of a good heart. The only problem in this world is greed. And that greed, that is solved by developing qualities of true virtue, which we develop when we know what the meaning of life is. We will get those qualities when we are no longer interested in material greed and material assets. Right? If right now in the world people were not interested in material things but more in spiritual things, then would the wars happen? Would science be misapplied? Would there be atomic bombs? So the problem is clear. The bodies are regulating bodies are there, but where is the solution? All the great thinkers of the world have said the solution lies in the heart. We have to transform people's hearts. We have to make them more virtuous. And this is why actually the greatest welfare, the greatest charity is to give people spiritual knowledge. Yeah.
So true, Prabhuji. Because those regulating body, those people who lead this regulating body, after they make their protocols, they're sick and they eat the animal flesh and they drink, and so you can expect that what kind of ethical followings which will be created out of this kind of bodies. So yes, that need for change of heart, that is more important, and that will come from the when they understand what is the meaning and purpose of life. So that's true, Prabhuji. Let's hope for the best. Let's see how the best can be created. So thank you, Prabhuji. Thank you very much, Professor. Thank you.
Yes. Well, we not only need to hope for the best, because hoping won't take us anywhere, but we need to work towards the best. As you're saying, we need to work towards the best. And the hard work is actually in our hands. We have the knowledge, we have the wisdom, especially the land of India has so much spiritual knowledge. And so we need to share the spiritual knowledge. We need to elevate the consciousness of the people around us, not even outside, even in India, we see, right? That if simply there was less greed for material things, then there would be no shortage in the world, no pollution, no degradation. So we have to give people spiritual knowledge, so they're not interested in material things so much, in hoarding things, and they don't judge their own happiness, like Socrates was saying. They don't judge their own success and happiness by the number of toys that they collect, by the number of material things that they have, by the amount of wealth that they have, but they judge their success by the greatness of their character, by the spiritual knowledge that they develop, by the spiritual enlightenment that they have. They judge success by those measures. I was once traveling, and behind in America, they have these campers where old people, they'll go in these little campers. In the camper, there's a bed, and they'll travel. So behind one camper, there's a bumper sticker, and the bumper sticker said, "One who dies with the most toys wins." Right? One who dies with the most toys wins. So this man, he had a very nice camper, and he had this sticker. Then a few campers, a few cars behind that, there was another car with a sticker in the back, and that sticker said, "One who dies with the most toys still dies." Right? So that is called real knowledge, realizing that even if we die with the most toys, we still die. So the goal of life is not to get the best scientific gadgets and technology, all the toys, but to conquer death, to actually realize our eternal soul.
Hello. Yeah, hi. My question is that this moral ethics, we can follow this moral ethics on the basis of education, on business ethics, and everywhere. But can we treat this moral ethics on the basis of international treaties between different countries, so that we can use it strictly on the basis of this? Because like the Ukrainian war, it will not happen if moral ethics should be imposed strictly on the countries. And what is your point of view on this moral ethics or virtues?
Yes, yes, definitely they can. This is why actually the Gita is spoken to a king, Arjun. It's definitely relevant to societies, countries, to heads of state around the world. However, once they are heads of state, it's almost too late. Then who can approach them? Who can convince them?
Yes.
The change and the moral teaching needs to happen in their childhood. As they say, charity begins at home, right? These leaders of state used to be children. They used to be students in the university. They are members of families. So the change happens in the family. When we learn these values, the change happens when we read Gita to our children, when we teach Gita in the universities, when we teach philosophy and Socrates to the intellectuals. This is when the change happens, because it is these people who become the leaders. And this is a point that's not just I'm saying it, but it's noted by all the great thinkers in the world. Confucius, again, he said that the way to bring social harmony in the world was by having harmony within the family. He saw the problem. He was living in a society where there was constant war. At that time in China, there was continuous war. China was called the warring states. And he said that the way to solve this problem of war is to have cooperative, peaceful families. And so he said, once the family unit is ideal, then automatically society will become ideal. And the family unit can be ideal when we teach spiritual values to our children and to the members of our family, the husband, the wife, like that.
Yes, but I want to understand that this moral ethics, is it why this power game is going on the world basis? Why don't we solve many problems like pollutions and climate changes problems in the use of moral ethics? Like these boundary problems, like you can see every country is concerned only for their boundaries, and these issues will create a war game between many power countries, and very low power countries will not have any like they are just puppets. So we need to understand this moral ethics should be coming to a major play force like between different countries. So instead of like our children will see all these things, you can see in Ukrainian war, you can see Sri Lankan financial collapsing. Every issues are there. So your point is very good. Your point is very relevant to current scenario, like in today's environment. And we can take,
Yes.
yes, and we can take science advancement in a positive way instead of taking into the negative way, into going into the atomic bomb. We can going into a energy harnessing, like we can use such kind of information to take the world into a new way.
Yes. Yes. To answer your question, that why is the world not changing?
Yeah.
It's not changing because because people are only talking, only speaking. They're not
Yes.
doing.
Yes, not doing, correct.
So you asked the question. Now I'm giving the answer. So please listen to the answer. So the problem in society is that we all want to talk about big things, but we don't want to do. I'll give you one example. Just like, since we're talking about him, it just comes to my mind. Just like Confucius, Confucius was initially the head of a very big granary, and he got a very lucrative job. But so he's very comfortable. There's no problem. He had a very nice, wealthy situation. But then Confucius realized that by being in this very wealthy situation, I'm not helping my fellow countrymen. Still there's war, still there's pestilence, people are dying left and right. So he left that and he began teaching and preaching the message of harmony, peace and wisdom, like these things. Our problem is that we're all interested in worldwide peace, worldwide harmony. But we are still, all the Indians of the world, they're engineers, they're doctors, they're still, which is all very good, but no one is actually trying to change the mindset of the people. And this is India's wealth. India's is its spiritual wisdom. It's not its advancement of science. So when we share the spiritual wisdom, then like you were saying, then people will know how to use science for our benefit, how to use science in a way that benefits human society. But that requires hard work. That requires effort. And we see so many of our ideal examples, like Prabhupada and others. They therefore shared this spiritual knowledge with the whole world, not just India, but the whole world. And particularly for India, for ourselves, for the people of ourselves. Because the change does not happen by itself. Certain people have to make sacrifices, like we see, to give this spiritual knowledge, and then the change comes. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Thank you.